The World Health Organization estimates that climate change will cause an additional 250,000 deaths every year between 2030 and 2050, and these can come through a variety of conditions, such as heat stress. Now, changes in the quality of air, water and food, they can also affect our health directly, and that will affect how we work and earn a living.
For more, let's bring in Professor Benjamin Horton. He's a chair at the NTU's Asian School of the Environment and principal investigator from Earth Observatory Singapore. Thanks for coming in.
Good evening.
Now, firstly, what's the chain of events then linking climate change to our health?
Well, first of all, we need to admit that climate change is happening. We can see that in global air temperature data. 15 of the warmest 16 years since records began in the 1880s have occurred. We can see that we're in the warmest decade. And when you get a gradual warming superimposed upon natural variability, you're getting these extremes. And we've seen extremes in heat in terms of droughts, wildfires. We've seen extremes in terms of flooding from precipitation or sea level rise. And these have been increasing in their frequency and their intensity in the last few years.
Benjamin, when we talk about how climate change is going to affect the way we work, who's most at risk here?
Well, if we look at heat stress in particular, it's people who work outside, so construction workers, agricultural workers. We also need to look at populations where they don't have, they're unable to cool themselves down, so in warehouses with a lack of air conditioning.
So how should we sort of change the way we look and think about work then in this context? Because I would imagine a lot of the countries or places you're describing are probably might be countries that, you know, having resources to sort of put to use in this regard might be quite a challenge.
Well, I mean, if we think about the impacts of heat stress, that's people being outside at high temperatures. We can have prolonged dehydration. And who are they going to affect? Well, they're going to affect the elderly, the infirm and the young. We also have effects that when you increase the air temperature, chemicals become more volatile, and therefore workers can be exposed to chemicals that they wouldn't otherwise know about. We also have increased vectors of diseases. So we're going to get increased instances of malaria, dengue fever. You just previously reported upon that because of increase in flooding and stagnant water being available.
So what needs to be done then, Benjamin?
Well, I think it's threefold. First of all is prevention, and that is reducing the amount of greenhouse gases. We know that if you reduce the amount of greenhouse gases, yes, you'll get a warming world, but that warming world will be gradual, it won't be rapid and abrupt, and we'll be able to adapt. The second is prevention, so having more sustainable practices in agriculture and having more sustainable practices in industry. And then finally, education, educating the workers about heat stress and associated health problems, but also educating companies that they can't expect workers to be in the midday sun when we've got temperatures perhaps well above 38 degrees C.
And how optimistic are you that there is a general enough acceptance to address these concerns?
Well, I think there's been a significant change in society over the last 10 years. Where there was ignorance, there now is knowledge. Where there was a lack of will for something to happen, populations are changing. We can see that, for example, in the European Union. The recent elections, there was an increase in the Green Party. The European leader herself had to make concessions on climate to get the votes. We now see that everywhere. An individual needs to have a voice on climate. They need to be informed on climate. Consumer awareness of where they purchase their products will have significant benefits on the economy and on industry. But finally, you need a leader. Governments need to make leaders. Big industry needs to be leaders.
Okay, well, thank you for coming in and lending your voice to this subject as well. Professor Benjamin Horton, chair of NTU's Asian School of the Environment and principal investigator from Earth Observatory Singapore.